Good morning. I'm MJ from Lioness Publications, and today we're going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Got a question that I was sort of pondering, and I said, you know what, let me delve into it deeper. And that's a question on what's going on in Texas right now. And I do want to, and that's with the redistricting, but I do want to bring you back to the video I did around July 4th, and that was the floods on Texas. And I specifically brought up a configuration that Texas has that whenever it gets hit in a certain way with transits or a progression of solar arc, it's going to affect certain parts of how Texas in effect acts. At that point in the charts I did, you could see that there was danger from floods. And you could see that maybe the response, the government response wouldn't be adequate. So there were a lot of things showing up. And the configuration is part of Texas' natal chart. Unfortunately, we don't have the actual time of birth. And it would take too much at this time for me to, in effect, try and rectify to get the time of birth. But I want to point out what that configuration is. And here I have it in effect circled. Now I have in the inner chart the United States. So in this case, everything is being based off of that chart, which is why these are in the positions they're in. In the following charts, you'll see that I'm basing it on a Texas chart, which is moving the positions of these in the circle, but it doesn't change the values. So what do we have here? We have what's called a T-square. And the T-square involves Mars, Mercury, and the Wounded Warrior. So the Wounded Warrior is Hertz that we have. Mercury are things like what we think, what we're planning, possibly things like legislature. Also involves children, neighbors. Mars is actions, aggression. So we're getting sort of like, okay, now what happened July 4th? We had Neptune sitting on Mars, and in effect, it was making a square to Mercury and an opposition to the Wounded Warrior. So in effect, there were Neptune, water, but confusion. We also had Jupiter, which was opposing Mercury, and it was square to the Wounded Warrior, and it was square to Mars. So in effect, Jupiter is too much of something. And that's why Jupiter is difficult in charts sometimes. We automatically assume too much of things can be good. It's not good when you have water. It's not good when you have fire. It's not good when you have things like cancer. So there are times that Jupiter, you don't want it in the picture because it's just going to make everything more bubbly, gaseous, and things like that. So I'm bringing this up because in this case, this could have an impact on things like redistricting to see if we're being impacted by that. So let's now, I described what happened in the flood. Now let's take a look at what's going on in effect. And this is for the 2026 election. Now, that's a ways off, but let's take a look at what's going on. Well, we've got Mars here, we've got Mercury, and we've got the Wounded Warrior. And now I'm bringing in, and that's in Texas's natal chart, but I'm also bringing in the United States natal chart. So what do we have here? We have, in effect, Venus in the United States natal chart completing the grand square for Texas. Venus is opposing Texas's Mercury, opposing the actions, and opposing, in effect, the Hertz, what they think they're being punished, in effect, for. So if, for example, for this redistricting, it could be there's going to be conflict over this. So that's interesting. Now, Venus in the United States chart happens to rule the 11th house. 11th house is Congress, specifically the House of Representatives. So in effect, something's being done that is in conflict. Now, it doesn't say how this is going to be settled, except that what we do have at that time is also Uranus coming in as a transit, and it's making an inconjunct to Mercury. Again, Mercury is plans, possibly legislature. What's an inconjunct? It's a break and adjust. What is Uranus? Change. But that isn't really giving us the whole picture. It's telling us change that's sudden and abrupt, but it is a change from the plans they got into effect or the plans they want to put into effect. So difficult to get a good grip. But chances are they're going to be able to move ahead with this. Now, I want to bring another chart in because this is interesting, and this goes back to, in effect, 1991. You're saying, why are we going back to 1991? That happens to be the year that a Democrat was elected governor in the state of Texas. And this is something that I've sort of been mentioning a few times, where Saturn in some of these state and government, state and U.S. charts are going to be sort of the GOP versus Jupiter is going to be the Democrats. Not always. It's not cast in stone. But I want to point out that when Texas flipped to have a Democratic governor, Pluto was coming up and doing what? Making a square angle to Saturn. Saturn, you think of Republican type of philosophies, policies. Strict, bringing in, narrowing, bringing in costs, looking at a financial picture rather than a different type. Pluto is what? Bring power down to that, on that. So in effect, it's reevaluating. So that was interesting. Now I want to pop up one other, the last one, back up here just for a minute, now that I said that. So in November of 2026, what do we have going on? Well, I want to point you to Jupiter over here in the Texas chart. That's sitting at 0 of Taurus. What's been happening with the Jupiter in Texas chart? It has a square from Pluto. And this has been going on, sort of building up, not just for, a few months. It's been building up for a while. So that means there was a definite move away from expansion type of policies. The good news, though, is that is now moving away from, Pluto's moving away from Jupiter. So it's going to move on to touch on other planets elsewhere. Now let's take a look at another chart. And I mentioned Ann Richards. So let's take a look at her. So she was a Democrat that made governor of Texas. Now, Texas, again, we've got Saturn actually in Aquarius here. So Ann Richards' Venus was actually trine to Texas Saturn. What does that mean? She was able to soften the hard edge of the policies of Republicans, which is good. And it also would draw in Republicans because while it's softening it, it's also making it trine to sort of say, yes, we do need to have responsibility here. So she was walking that fine line. Now, if you're looking to make inroads, this is sort of what you need to do. You need to have charts that can counter things in a state's chart. What else does she have? Well, I noted a while ago that typically, and again, not cast in concrete, Republicans will have earth and fire versus Democrats, water and air. But that's not cast in concrete. Earth, when you have Virgo, tends to be a very analytical sign and may move more into a democratic realm. So that's important to know. So it's an earth sign, but not really Republican because Virgo is all about facts, all about the details. So what does Ann Richards have? She's got Sun, Neptune, Jupiter, all in Virgo. Person that gets things done, relies on the facts, and, pretty much says it as it is. So that would be attractive to Republicans. So I hope again, this is going down a rabbit hole. So simple question of, okay, redistricting sort of turned into, well, 1 minute, what's going on with Texas with this T-square? What does that mean when it comes to the United States chart? And why was Texas at one time having a Democratic governor? And this is how you learn about astrology. You let it take you down the rabbit holes and you find charts. And you use those charts to say, okay, what happened here? Does it prove my theory? Or does it disprove it? Okay. I hope you enjoyed this and have a great day. Bye.